of these words. Cases, os, u, o, on, and so learn these forms in this way. Learn os, u, o, on, e, on, is, us, just as the tape says. Os, u, o, on, e, on, is, us. Learn those, and then there on page, paragraph 41, you see another set of forms, and those we have here in your workbook on page 8. You see the list of logos that we just talked about, and then you see thoron over here. Now, these are very similar. Thoron, you already know that one from the vocabulary form, thoron, and then the nominative and accusative are the same in the neuter. Nominative and accusative are the same form. Thoron, thoron. It will be true also in the plural. Thora, thora. Then the genitive and dative are the same as the masculine. U-o, u-o. So if you know these, and you already know that thoron is the nominative here, and it's going to therefore be the accusative here, you really don't have to learn anything new except that this thora, once you know thora, that will be also the accusative. These genitive and dative forms are going to be the same again, and so that will help you in learning the neuter once you already know the masculine. So concentrate on the masculine and then identify that with the neuter and learn those forms. Now let's look at some paragraphs in Machen, page 23, paragraph 25. There are 3 declensions in Greek. The second declension is the one we're studying now. It's also called the O declension. And the other two, the first we'll study in the next chapter, and then the third we'll get much later on, chapter 17. So this is the second declension. Then in paragraph 26, he says there is no definite article in Greek, no indefinite article. By that he means there is no word a. It's either the or nothing. That means then that for now what we'll do is we'll translate, if there's an article there, once we get the article forms in chapter 5, if there's an article there, we'll say the brother or the whatever. If there's no article, we'll say a in the singular. But that doesn't mean that it's indefinite. We'll simply do that for the ease of translation in the first part. Don't let anyone tell you if there's no article there, it has to be a, as in John 1:1. That simply is not true, and that person who tells you that either had no Greek at all or he didn't get past chapter 5 of Machen. So, just paragraph 26. 27 says the noun in the Greek has gender, number, and case. There are 3 genders. 28. The genders are masculine, feminine, and neuter, just like English. But the gender is not determined simply by sex, though that is the case sometimes. For the most part, it's simply learn what the gender is and then go by that, rather than by the differentiation between sex or between persons and non-persons. In paragraph 29, he says the 2 numbers are singular and plural. That shouldn't be any problem. That's just like the verb. A singular, one, plural, many. The cases. There are 5 cases, he says in paragraph 30. There are nominative, genitive, dative, accusative, and vocative. And you see in the paragraph 31, that he has anthrope, a man. Well, we'll ignore that for now. Just plain ignore it. We'll not learn it at all. We'll go from anthropos, then on through os, u, o, on. Now, those will be the indication of the cases. And on beginning with paragraph 34 on page 25, he tells us how to use the cases. Now, I'd like for us to note this as we look at the chalkboard here, that the os nominative, and this is paragraph 34, he says that is used as subject. So let's put a diagram over here, and we'll make a visual use of the case here. For instance, if it's nominative, it's going to be subject. This is the subject spot in a diagram. And we'll find here the nominative case. And the nominative case will be either os in the masculine, or e if it's plural. You'll find then the words that end in os or e as subjects of a sentence. Then he says also in paragraph 34, that the object is in the accusative. So going along with Machen, we'll go ahead and do this one next. Own. The accusative will be the direct object. Here's the direct object down here, the object of the verb. And so we'll find the object, the accusative case, and that will be either own or us. Singular, plural. Own, accusative. Then in paragraph 35, he says, the genitive is the case of possession. Genitive, ou, or own. Ou or own, the genitive case, will be the case of possession. We usually have the word of in English. We say of this or of that. The possessive, and the possessive will be modifying the word it follows. So it could be following this one, that would be the genitive. Possessive, the genitive case, either ou or own. It could be there, it could be over here. Wherever the genitive, whichever word the genitive follows, that's the word it will be in construct with, or as we say, modifying it. The final one is the dative. The dative, either o or is is the case of the indirect object. Now, the indirect object is probably the one that we'll have a little more trouble with in English. Let me give you an illustration. He threw me the ball. Now, remember how in English you used to underline the subject, underline the verb. Here's the subject, here's the verb, where's the object? Not me, the ball. See? That's what he threw. The object is always answering the question who or what. So, he threw the ball. Now, where is me coming in? Well, me is the indirect object. He threw the ball, but he threw the ball to me. So, if you can, in English, if you can understand either a to or a for in the sense of the sentence, you understand that. You don't have it written in. You understand it. Then that's the indirect object. That's the indirect object in English. Now, in Greek, then, the indirect object, the to or for thing, will be either in the dative, either the o or the is. And we diagram the indirect object under the verb. So you'd have indirect object, dative case, and you'll have either the o or the is in the masculine declension. So you see them, we already had the verb from last lesson, from lesson 3, and now we have the subject, verb, a subject and an object, an indirect object. We have possessive, so we have all kinds of things ready to work with now, and this is going to help us to really form sentences and really get into our Greek from here. Now, this really brings us into the diagramming, so let's look just at a section on diagram. Well, before we do that, look at page 5A of your workbook. 5A. We want to begin here, and we'll be working on this page the rest of our time in Greek. You see the uses of the cases, nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative, and we have one of each now. For nominative, we'll have subject. For genitive, we'll have possession. For dative, we'll have indirect object. For accusative, we'll have direct object. So you ought to write those into your workbook, and then as we get further uses, you see we have a lot of lines here. We won't use them all, but we'll have a lot of uses for the various cases, and we'll add those as we come along. So let's fill that in, and then we'll talk about that a little more later. Then we have the diagramming. You see we talked about diagramming the subject, and then the object, the verb is already in there. Subject, object. Now, what we want to do in our homeworks is diagram every sentence. Don't do anything without diagramming. So, we're going to say, this one, by the way, is number 1 in your exercises for this lesson. A brother sees a man. Now, the Greek is right here. This is a recap of the whole thing. A brother sees a man. You translate this into this other diagram. A brother sees a man. Adolphos βλέπει άνθρωπον. A brother sees a man. So, diagram, first of all, the sentence in the book, translate that into the opposite diagram, and then write out that sentence on the side of the paper. So this will be the form that you do your homework. When you get your homework sent in, this will be the form. And normally you will do 10 Greek to English and 5 of the English to Greek. And turn those in for correction if you're taking it for credit in any way. Now, while you're on the subject of homework, let's talk about the addendum. On page 62 of your workbook, you'll see illustrations of all kinds of diagramming, and they're numbered. This will be page 27, number 1, the one we just talked about. Adolphos βλέπει άνθρωπον, a brother sees a man, written out, translation. Then in number 7, same sentence, you see a compound. Brothers receive slaves and houses. And you see that here's the nominative here, subject. Here are the accusatives, us. And then the compound sentence, compound objects are connected by ke. Zulus ke ikus. So diagram compound parts this way, and then write out the sentence inside. That's number 7. Number 12 has an indirect object, see? A brother says a word to an apostle. A brother says a word to an apostle. So in your English diagram, you ought to have the word to in there, in parentheses, because parentheses indicates that there's really no word to correspond with to, but it is a part of the meaning of the translation. So we put it in parentheses. In your Bibles, it will be in italics. And then number 20 on page 28, you see a genitive of possession. Sons of apostles. There's the genitive right there. And then you see a compound verb and object. And that's number 20. So you look at that in the exercises, and you'll see an illustration of all the diagramming in this book somewhere, in the addendum or in the chapter in which we learned that kind of construction. Now back to Machen for one last or two last paragraphs. In paragraph 43, he speaks of order of the words. Now, in English, if I want to give you the subject, I normally have to say that first because we don't have endings. If I want to say a brother sees a slave, I have to put brother first. If I say slave sees brother, then you're going to think slave is the subject, and it will be in English. In Greek, that's the normal word order, subject, verb, object. But it isn't always that way, and Machen is going to change it around a little bit just to see if you're paying attention, because you can look at the endings and find out which is the subject. Just as that one we talked about with the brothers take slaves and houses, that is number 7, and you see the objects come first, and then the verb, and then the subject is at the last. And you know which it is because of the ending. So word order will normally be that, but watch the endings. That's the most important part. Then in paragraph 44, we have the movable knee. We have a movable N in English. If you wanted to say, you can say a chair, or you can say a hat, or if you want to say apple, would you say a apple? A little hard to say. So you don't say a apple, you say an apple, and that is the movable N in English. Well, we have a movable knee in Greek, and it occurs not with the indefinite articles because we had none, but it occurs at the end of the third person plural verb, the usi ending. Maybe usin, usi or usin, especially before vowels or sometimes at the end of the sentence. So watch that. When you see it, you won't be puzzled by it. Verse 7 has one, by the way, or number 7. Lamvanu sin, before that aleph, or the alpha of the adelphi. So watch that. And then for your exercises, do the first 10 of the Greek to English, first 5 English to Greek, and Don't do your exercises until you know your vocabulary without looking back, until you know your forms without looking back. In other words, line upon line, precept upon precept, because if you do it real fast, you'll build a house of cards and it'll all come tumbling down about lesson 11. So get that squared away, and then you'll be ready to go on to lesson 5. There, wasn't that fun? You finished all your homework, right? Don't fudge now. If you finished all your homework, you probably did them all, didn't you? You went all the way through and you didn't realize how much work it was, and all of a sudden you were finished. Of course, your wife complained. Your husband said, oh, the dirty dishes are piling up in the sink. But you got excited about it, because that's the way Greek will grab you. That's all you can talk about. You go to church and you have to tell everybody you're taking Greek. It's fun. It isn't bragging. You're just telling what you really are excited about. Well, that's what Greek is, and we're going to get a little more today. We're going to get the new vocabulary for the first declension, and this is called the A declension because it has an A in the ending or an eta. So the vocabulary is in paragraph 46. Aletheia is the first one, and you see the E there. That indicates that it's feminine. So aletheia, truth or a truth. Vasileia, a kingdom. Graphi, a writing or a scripture. Graphi. Now we had grapho, to write, or I write, and this is graphi, a writing or a scripture. Doxa, a glory. Doxa. You sing the doxology in your church, only you call it the doxology. Doxology or doxa, glory. Irene is the word for peace. Irene, peace. Ecclesia, a church. Endoli. Now, note that the way I said that. Endoli. When a ni comes before a taf, then this has a D sound. Endoli. Endoli. You'll have to remember that. A lot of words, especially the participles, will have that form in it, or that construction. So, endoli, a commandment. Zoe, a life. We get the word zoology. You get a zoo. That's the word for life. Zoology or zoe, a life. Imera, a day. Imera, a day. Cardia, a heart. Cardiology, electrocardiogram. That's the word from this word, cardia, heart. Paraboli, a parable. That's a transliteration. Paraboli, a parable. Phonii, a voice. Now, a phonograph is a voice writing. You've had graphi, a writing, phony, a voice. A voice writing is a phonograph. Phony, a voice. Psyche, we get the word psychology from this. Psyche, a soul, and then ora, an hour. Those are the vocabulary for this section for lesson 5. And now we want to look at the forms over here on the flip chart. And we'll see that we have three different kinds of forms, but they're not a lot different. We have ora. Here's the stem, ora. We have doxa, and we have graphi. Now, remember then, this is the nominative, this is the genitive, the dative, and the accusative. Keep those in your mind. And we're only dealing here with the singular. Ora, and then the endings, thusly, endings here, and the endings here. Now, you'll notice that there's a difference here. They start off the same, it's alpha in both cases, but you have an eta here and here. In the genitive and dative, an eta. And the question is why? Well, paragraph 55. Look in Machen, paragraph 55, and you'll see that he says, if the stem ends in either a rho, iota, or epsilon, then the alpha will be retained throughout the singular. We're not talking about the plural, we're talking about the singular. The alpha will be retained throughout the singular if the stem ends in rho, iota, or epsilon. If the stem does not end in one of those, then the genitive and dative will change to eta. The alpha changes to eta in the genitive and dative singular. So, it's easy as pie. If it ends in rho, iota or epsilon, alpha throughout. If it isn't one of those, eta in the genitive and dative singular. Now, there's another paragraph, paragraph 57, which talks about the words ending in eta. And what it says is that the eta will be retained throughout if it begins it there. So, eta here, eta throughout, no problem. This paragraph 55 has nothing to do with words ending in eta. It's only when the word ends in alpha, then you look at that. That shouldn't be any problem. Then you see in your workbook that these three have a common plural. And let's look at that workbook page. It's page 9 of your workbook. See, we have the same thing here. Here's ora, here's doxa, and here's graphi. And we also have one here from chapter 7. We'll get this later. This is the prophetes. And the endings are all the same. On, es, as. So attempt to learn those. A, as, a, on, es, as. A, as, a, on, es, as. Learn it that way. Doxa, a, is, e, on, es, as. Graphi, e, is, e, in, es, as. Do it just that way. Take the tape, learn it. There's no substitute for learning those things by rote. Then you see on page 9 of the workbook, paragraph 55 and 57 are written right there. Those are your forms. Now, I want to go back to the vocabulary and drill just a little bit on that. For instance, I want to ask you the question. We'll cover up we need to cover anything up. Just tell me, look at aletheia. Tell me if that alpha will be retained throughout or if it will change to eta in the genitive and dative singular. Make up your own mind, then you might want to look at that workbook and see what the rule is. And if you said that the alpha would be retained throughout, then you're right, because the last letter of the stem is iota. Vasilia, what about that one? Will it be alpha throughout? The answer is yes, because the stem ends in iota. Again, how about graphi? Will graphi be retained throughout, or will it change? Aha, I didn't catch you, did I? Because if it begins with eta, eta is retained throughout, no matter. Always, all right? Doxa, will alpha change, or will it remain the same? The answer, of course, is that since that is not rho, iota, or epsilon, it will change in the genitive and dative singular. Go through that, all those vocabulary, and see if you can predict which they'll be. Do that until you do them all perfectly, then you will have the rule down. Now, in the workbook, we have another sheet on page 10A. Page 10A, we want to begin something here, and that is we want to get ready for a lot of forms which are going to have the same endings. We have this page, and then look at 10B, you'll see that it has some more of the same thing. So what I want you to do is, we won't take time here on the tape, but you can fill in logos all the way through. Os, u, o, on, aon, es, ion, isus, and then ora, and then graphi, and then thoron. Fill those in, put all the forms in, and then you'll find, when we look at chapter 6, that the adjectives will have the same endings, and then the article will have the same endings, and then we'll have some pronouns with the same endings. So it's going to be, we'll not be learning all new forms, but just putting the same endings on the other forms as we go through. So fill those in before we come back next time. Do your homeworks, the same thing, the first 10 Greek to English, the first 5 English to Greek, and then we'll be ready to look at the adjectives in lesson 6. Lesson 6 is the adjectives. You've been doing your homework, I presume. Isn't it fun? If you think that was fun, you ought to see Chapter 6. The important thing is that you stay with those vocabulary words, stay with the forms, and then really get your understanding from one chapter before you go on to the next. Now, in this chapter, we're going to look at the adjectives, and then agreement between adjectives and their words they modify, use of the article, and then the uses of the adjectives, as we'll see in 3 different uses. First, the vocabulary. Paragraph 60. You'll find we're on page 33 of Machen and page 11 of the workbook. Agathos, eon, adjective, good. Now you notice that there is not just one letter here after this word, there are 2. Now agathos, being an adjective, has not only masculine forms, it also has feminine and neuter. So we have the ita there to indicate that it's feminine. The feminine form will be ita, and then the on will be the ending for the neuter. So those are not articles now, they are endings for the other 2 genders, the feminine and the neuter. Allos, E-O, is the word for other, and it really isn't an adjective. It's used as an adjective, but the form comes from a pronoun, and therefore you have O there instead of own. Allos, O, own.